This is the biggest crowd I've ever had at one of my lectures, so I'm impressed. I asked my family to come so I could at least have a few people here, not knowing that I was going to have this fantastic audience. And so I even invited my good friend Sam. I went to school with Sam's father. That shows you how old I am. If you know, Sam is up there in years too, but now he's the son of Samatoa, who's a very good friend of mine. His dad passed away quite a few years ago, but was a great mentor for me while I was at BYU. So I'm a BYU graduate, and you can all applaud about that. Okay, well, anyway. I'm impressed. Brad took me around and showed me the school, and I'm very impressed with what I saw here at UVU. I had no idea that you had such a fantastic student body, and it's the largest school now, I think, in Utah, the largest university in Utah. So it's wonderful to be with you and to be able to share with you a little bit of my background and the experiences you're going to have today. So, do you guys know what a smash course is? It's a crash course on steroids. So that's what you're going to get today. You're going to get a crash course or a smash course in how to run a business. So I guess I have to advance my own slides. So a little bit about me. I'm a graduate of Brigham Young University in industrial engineering. And then I went to San Jose State and got a master's science degree in business at San Jose State in San Jose, California. I live in the Bay Area. For those of you who are familiar with the Bay Area near San Francisco, I live in between San Jose and San Francisco, and kind of what they call the Banana Belt, and live very close to Stanford University, where I also had a chance to teach at Stanford. Again, I really appreciate being invited to be with you today and to share with this great student body a little bit of my experience. So as this slide shows, I'm the founder of Micrel Semiconductor. We're one of the longest companies in the semiconductor industry. I had a wonderful experience starting it with a partner of mine. And the whole concept of the company was to build a company around people. We didn't have any products. So what we did is when I had invented the wafer stepper at my prior company, my boss said, you shouldn't really work for anybody. You're too much of an entrepreneur. You should be on your own. So I went home and told my wife, I said, I'm never going to work for anybody ever again. And that was in July of 1976. So since July of 76, I've not had anybody else sign my paycheck. So I started Micrel with the concept of making it a people-oriented company. And so a lot of companies are formed around a product. So we didn't form a company around a product. We formed it around people. And that's the whole concept that I share in my book, Tough Things First. Because you're going to hear a lot about how companies are run. You have people visiting with you in these lecture series. So you'll get a good glimpse of how various companies are run. So my concept was to build a company with people. And so, of course, you can't be venture funded that way, because if you go to a venture capital fund, they want to see your product. They want to see the roadmap, the growth of the business, and how it's going to create value for their shareholders. And so this wouldn't work. So we couldn't go with the VC route. So I had to borrow money, and I borrowed $300,000, and I put up $300,000 with myself and my partner, and so we had $600,000. That's what we started the company with. Now, most semiconductor companies start with about $20+ million. The average in our industry over the years has been over $50 million. So you can see that what we did with $300,000 of our own capital plus the bank loan, we were able to sell the company in August for $840 million. So that shows you what we could do by just building it around people and not necessarily around products. We weren't actually able to develop our own products until 1989, or I actually started about 87, but introduced our first products in about 1989. So the company had to be, because we were bank funded, we had to be profitable every single quarter. And so here we are a new startup, as you would, and couldn't lose money. And I think real companies make money. They don't lose money. So when you think about starting your own company, remember that it's there to make money. Now, if you have to lose money for a while, make sure that you can get profitable within a year or two. So even if you have to lose money, limit it. Don't do some of these guys that are out there losing money for 10 to 15 years. So we were able to stay profitable for 36 out of 37 years on a GAAP basis. For those of you who don't know accounting, that's general acceptable accounting practices. So that's the real measure of a company's profitability, is if it's referenced on a GAAP basis. And so the company was profitable on a GAAP basis for 36 out of 37 years. No one's ever accomplished that before. And so that was another thing that we're very, very proud of, is to be able to do that. So you guys are the next wave of the future for our country. And I hope that the training, the teaching you get here is going to be beneficial to you so that you can be the next future of business. And I hope that the information I'm going to share with you today will allow you to be able to do that. Now, we're going to allow about 10 minutes of Q&A at the end of my lecture. So if I end up like I'm talking too fast, it's because I'm trying to get through a lot of material in a short period of time. So again, you are the future, but the current wisdom, as you would, is an error. In other words, you don't have to start a company with a product. Now, you have to have an idea of the industry you want to be in. You have to say, what, I want to do software? Do I want to be in real estate? Do I want to be in some other technology business? You have to have an idea of the industry you want to serve, but you don't necessarily have to have a product. You have to build the people first, because better people make better employees. So what I tell my people when I hire them, especially the staff that reports to me, is I said, I'm not here to make you rich. That's your job. I'm here to help you become a better person, a better father, mother, husband, wife, citizen. That's my job. That's what I see is my role in helping you become a better person. And that was the goal that we had. And so as a result of that, we had one of the lowest turnovers in our industry because we developed that concept of people as opposed to just running a business, as you would. So again, I tell all my people, you make yourselves rich. You can be the entrepreneurs within the organization. Again, you don't have to start your own company to be an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is just someone who has that vision and that ability to be able to take that information that he's working with, whether he's a department head or whether he's a CEO, and he can make a difference in his organization. That's really what an entrepreneur does. He's really a leader in his particular area of expertise. So again, you don't have to be a CEO. You don't even have to be a business owner. You can be an entrepreneur if you have an entrepreneurial view, which means outside the box thinking. So inside the box is everything you know. That's your known. That's the parameters you operate in. So you say, okay, here I am. I'm this accounting manager, or I'm this real estate manager, and here's the box that I'm in. As long as you stay inside that box, you're not an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur thinks of, what can I do to get outside the box? What can I do to enhance that, magnify that position that I hold? And that's what I mean when I talk about being an entrepreneur. Magnifying your position, getting outside that box that you're stuck in. So I'm going to talk about a few principles that you have to understand. And this is where this becomes a smash course in running a business. So I'm going to touch on it as briefly as I can so that we can get to some Q&A, because that's what I've heard from all the other courses that I've taught, that you seem to enjoy the most, is being able to ask me questions, and I can then respond to your particular questions and needs. So the first thing you have to remember is cash is king. You can't go out of business as long as you have cash. And so you got to remember that when I ran my company, I was told that I had this little shoebox. I didn't really have one, but they said, Ray Zinn has this shoebox in his drawer, and he hands the money out $1 at a time, which is kind of true in a way, because I monitored very carefully the outflow of my cash. And I'm going to talk about cash flow in a minute. But again, remember, you can't go out of business as long as you have money. And so, cash is king. And do not forget that. That's why it has this crown on it. Now see, I can't read that one. Oh yeah, be bottom line oriented. I have a vision problem. I lost my eyesight several years ago, so I have a hard time seeing. Anyway, so being bottom line oriented means you look at being profitable. You can't, unless you have an infinite amount of cash, at some point you're going to run out of cash unless you can replenish that reservoir. And to do that, it means you've got to focus on the bottom line. And a lot of companies don't. They focus on growth. And growth doesn't make it, because unless you have the revenue dropping to the bottom line, you're not going to replenish your cash reservoir. So again, remember, focusing on the bottom line is important in running a successful business. Let's see. Well, I'm going to need my what?
Raise all the money you need before.
Oh, yeah. If you're going to start a business, make sure you raise all the money you need before you start your business. Because what I see happening in far too many businesses, and I'll say 80 to 90% of them, is they are constantly out there trying to raise money. And that doesn't work. So what you do is you look and say, okay, my plan is that I want to be cash positive by year 2. Let's say that's your parameters. You got to raise enough money to take you to that point in year 2 that you can be at least at break even, if not, putting a little money in the drawer. So again, it's very important to have a bottom line focus in your business, and not to have any more than a year to 2 year horizon in your business plan. Wow, I'm having a hard time seeing it. What?
VC not the way to go.
VC.
Oh, VC. Venture capital is not the way to go. And the reason that is because, as I told you before, you have to focus on a product. And the VCs just want you to spend money because they want you to get growth as fast as you can. So they're not bottom line focused. They're strictly top line focused. That's the important thing for the VCs, is that they have a top line growth curve. And that, in my view, is not the way to go. Again, that's not the way real companies should run their business, is to focus only on growth. Growth is fine if you can drop to the bottom line as you do that.
Learn to do the tough things first.
There you go. Thanks, Brian. The title of my book, Learning to Do Tough Things First. So what I found in running Micrel in my early days, I was in my 30s at the time, is that it was difficult for me to do the tough things. And I had to learn that I had to love the things I hated to do. And I know this sounds crazy, but learning to love the things you don't like doing develops a discipline. Discipline is nothing more than doing what you don't like doing and doing it well. That's the whole concept of what discipline is, whether you're running a marathon or whether you're running a company. It's really doing what you don't like doing and doing it well. And that's the key here, is to have that ability to learn to love the things you hate. So to do that, I learned to do the tough things first, which meant every morning I would tackle I list the tasks that I don't want to do, and my wife will tell you, even to this very day, I get up at 5:30 in the morning, I start exercising. It's hard for me, but I tackle the tough things first. I get that out of the way. So I exercise for an hour, then I get ready for work. And even though I'm retired, I'm still working. And so I focus on, okay, what is it now I don't want to do next? And then I do that next. So I always get through the tough things first, so that the balance of my day is free. Because what happens is that if you have to sit there and say, okay, I got to remember to do that task, either today or tomorrow or some later point, that's going to be on your mind. You're going to be 30% less efficient. And that applies to you as students, by the way. If you get in and do the tough part of your material first and get that out, you won't be thinking about it. You'll improve your ability to study 30% better. I promise you that you will gain a 30% improvement in your efficiency if you'll take off and do those tough things first. And that's really the title of my book, and the focus of the book is to do the tough things first. Oh yeah, well now I know what this is. That's a good graphic, okay? Learn to listen. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And I break it down into 2 parts. One's called a willing listener, and the other is called a person willing to listen. So a willing listener is someone like a doctor who's really concerned about you. He lets you talk. He lets you tell him how you feel because you're the best example to him of what he needs to help you fix. And so he wants to hear, he wants to listen to how you feel. So a willing listener is somebody, again, the bottom trait of both being a willing listener or willing to listen is to be humble. And so being humble allows you to listen carefully to what that person's saying, not interrupting. You know, again, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Use them proportionally. Okay, so now a person willing to listen is like a student. A good student is willing to listen. He wants to be taught. And that's the bottom line that you have to do here as students at this great university is to be the listener, to let the teacher do the talking, not you. And if you're off dreaming about something else, working on your iPhones or your tablets or whatever, you're not paying attention. So, you know, when I went to school, we didn't have all that. And so I spent a lot of time just focusing on my teacher. And I didn't do it offline. I mean, or online. I did it actually in class. And that was good because I was able to get the gestures and the inflections of my teacher. And God bless the teachers. I mean, they are the best. And that's what you need is to really get close and learn from your teacher. That's another thing that I learned is the importance of being truly humble and willing to listen.
People are the most
Yeah. People are your most important asset. And that's why I started Micrel. I knew that, and the reason I left my prayer company because I was tired of getting fired. You know, Tom Peters in his book, Pursuit of Excellence, says, if you're not getting fired, you're just not trying hard enough. And so, you know, I can tell you I must have been trying pretty hard because I got fired a lot. So the bottom line is that if you really focus on your people, then they will work for you. And that means you have to bring them in. You have to know them as a person, know their children, know their birth dates almost, you know a lot about them. Invite them in to your inner circle. Learn to know who they are as a person. Once they see that you care for them as a person, then they'll be loyal and they'll work hard for you. You know that as a coach, right? So, you know, if you have that close relationship with your players, then they're gonna work harder for you than if you just say, you know, just constantly yelling at them to do this or that. So again, your people are your most important asset. So those of you who are going to start a company or have an organization of people, remember they are your most important asset. Treat them kindly and fairly. So we have a culture at Micrel. You know, the culture is honesty, integrity, dignity of every individual. What that means is that no condescending language. Even though our company was in California, we didn't allow any swearing. Swearing was forbidden. You would be terminated if you used condescending language more than once. So again, no swearing, treating everybody with respect and dignity. That will go a long way to keep your people happy and motivated. And the last culture is doing whatever it takes, no excuses. Now what that means basically is like the repentance process. I mean, if you make a mistake, that's not a problem. The problem is whether you correct it or not. You know, as they say, you know, no harm, no foul. So if you correct your mistake, and you know what that means, correcting your mistakes, number one, you have to admit it. Second thing is you have to confess it. Third thing is you got to repair the damage. And the fourth is don't do it again. And so that's what you do. And if you have a problem with your boss or if your teacher at school here, you make a mistake, it's not a problem as long as you fix it. Those steps, admit it, confess it, remediate it, and then don't do it again.
Understanding cash flow.
Okay. Earlier, I was talking to you about the importance of bottom line focus. So understanding cash flow, now I've talked to Dean Wright, and not all of you here are accounting students, and so understanding cash flow is maybe a little difficult concept for you to get, but it's very important for you to understand what cash flow is when you run a business, or even when you're running a department. That means you set a budget, and your budget lists a bunch of items that you have to control, okay, and then you have to know where that money is being spent and how it's being spent. And so, cash flow is built up as what they call sources and uses of cash. So, increasing accounts receivable is a use of cash. Decreasing accounts receivable is a source of cash, and so forth, and accounts payable and so forth. So, understanding cash flow is very important. And hopefully, they teach that here at UVU. Don't know the course material you have here, the curriculum, but understanding cash flow is very important if you're going to run a successful business.
Classes you need to take.
Okay. Now, this is my opinion. I'm not necessarily saying it's being shared by Dean Wright, but these are the core courses that I think are important if you're going to run a successful business. So, I think these online available, for them to, as far as my materials that I'm presenting today?
Can sure make them if you.
Okay, so for those of you who want to review these materials, you can, if Brad says they're available. But anyway, the courses that I think are important is financial and managerial accounting. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't other things that are important. It's just that these are the core courses that I think that you really need. If you're going to have no other courses, you need to have these 4. And I've told my grandsons this. You right? Nod your head. Yes. Okay. Okay. So financial and managerial accounting, economics, basic accounting, and business law. Now, in business law, I know that you're not going to become a lawyer by understanding, just getting through 1.5 to 3 units of business law you have here. But it's very important that you understand business law, because you're going to be writing contracts, you're going to get involved in some tort issues, and just understanding the whole concept of the legal system, because that's how this country was built, was on our legal system. That's really, if you look at the Supreme Court and the balance of power between the various branches of government, are all based on legal issues. And business law, even though you're maybe not going to be taught how to defend a case in court, you need to understand how the law works. And that's what you get in business law. And again, I'm not real familiar with the courses you have here at UVU, but I'm sure that it gives you that scope and that knowledge you need to help you understand the law relative to running a business. There you go.
Connecting and sharing.
Q&A.
Okay, so looks like I've saved myself even more time than I thought I would have. So how much time do we have total, Brad?
We've got about 20 more minutes total.
Okay, so maybe I rushed too fast in my presentation. So what I'd like to do is now turn it over to you to let you ask me some questions. So we're a little ahead of schedule, but people seem to like Q&A better than anything anyway. So we're going to go ahead with Q&A. Yes. Can you give her a microphone for me?
We're going to give her a microphone and a book.
Oh, and by the way, I've signed those books. So if you ask a question, you get a book.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so you talked about being bottom line oriented. What were some of the most important things that, like when you were starting up your business or as you continued, that you found to be the bottom line? Like what were some of those things for you?
Okay, so when we say bottom line oriented, it means if you focus only on growth, on revenue, that may cause you to lose money. Okay, so when I say bottom line, when in accounting, the bottom line is your profitability. So you want to be focused on making money. That's what that means by being bottom line oriented. So when you do a budget, you know, even as an individual head of your family, as you would, you know, you have certain income coming in, and then you have certain expenses against your income, you know, rent and tuition and so forth. And then the bottom line is, what do you have left over? And if you add up all your expenses and they're greater than your income you have coming in, then you're losing money, okay? And that's not being bottom line oriented. You have to live within your budget. So I was very careful about maintaining a very good budget at the company, planning, you know, so that, as they say, you hope for the best, but you plan for the worst. And so what I did is that I made sure that my expenses were not greater for the next quarter than I had in the prior quarter. And since I always made money in my prior quarter, the next quarter, if my revenue were the same, then I would make sure that I would make money. So I wouldn't, even though my revenue increased, I didn't increase my expenses until I had 2 quarters of revenue growth. Then I would allow expenses to increase. Does that make sense?
I have a question right here. So 36 out of 37 years you were positive on the books, you said?
On the GAAP basis.
What did you do as the owner of the company? What did you do to avoid the feeling of we're too big to fail, we're, you know, we can't ever fail? What did you do to keep innovating and stay positive?
Okay, it's kind of her question in a way. You know, if you're going to grow your business, you have to have the products that are going to grow. And so in our industry, it takes about 1.5 years to develop the product, and it takes another 1.5 years to get it adopted. And the product life cycle is about 5 years, average. And so you have to be able to, you know, you got to look ahead, because if it's going to take you 1.5 years to develop the product, another 1.5 years to get it adopted, you're 2/3 of through your product life. So you got to be able to get ahead of that curve, so that your product life cycle is not perturbated. And so, you know, understanding your markets, understanding what kind of products you need, you know, for the future is what'll keep you growing and growing your revenue. So staying close to your customers, understanding where they're headed, you know, really being able to be, you know, differentiating in your products is what allow you to have sustainability in the growth of your revenue.
Next one's right here.
Yes.
So this question sort of goes along with that. The growth of Silicon Valley and the tech sector really kind of boomed, I think, right around the time you were there. How did you find out how to stay ahead of the curve? I know you mentioned staying close to your customers, but was there anything else that you did to maintain relevance in your industry?
Good point. So, as you mentioned, I was there from almost the very beginning of the industry. 1963 is when I joined the semiconductor industry. Not I didn't start the company then, but I was an employee. So 15 years later, I started Micrel, and so I was there from the very beginning. So Silicon Valley is named after the wafer, which is a thin slice of silicon. It's about 6 to 8 inches in diameter. Now they're up to 12 inches. And the circuits are photolithographically imaged on the wafer, and then they're cut up in small chips, we call them, and then put in packages. And so that's why they call it Silicon Valley. It got its name in 1967 from the folks at Intel. Silicon Valley really isn't Silicon Valley anymore, because there's very few semiconductor companies left in Silicon Valley. It's now more like Software Valley. And so what happened was that semiconductors enabled software to exist. So really, if you look at the transition going from silicon, now we have software, and software now is the sequel to or the segue from chips. So I knew I could see that happening. So rather than just doing these chips, I also had to develop software for my chips. So you have to be able to understand that you're now building no longer a chip, you're building a system. That system has to include software. So a lot of our products required software, which meant we became more like a microprocessor in concept. And so you got to be able to, as they say, move with the cheese, for those of you who know that book. And so keeping ahead of the curve means your people have to understand which way your industry is going. You have to adapt. You know, the industry now is pretty worldwide. You know, we've enabled every country in the world almost to make semiconductors, which is a concern to me. In fact, I just tweeted something today on that very subject, because China now is building their own infrastructure for semiconductors, and I think that's a shame, because we're enabling them now to compete with us. And so, anyway, back to your point, you have to really know the direction your industry's headed, and you have to change in your product definition. So just like we did, going from chips to systems is kind of which way the industry moved. So we were integrating from being basically just a chip to an actual system on a chip, as you would. So again, that's kind of what you have to do to stay ahead of the game.
Right here. My question is, what steps did you take to avoid pitfalls and challenges in your partnership?
Okay, that's a good point. You know, some of you here probably have been on a mission, and you know, your companion is, you rotate companions a lot, and you have to learn to get along with your companion. And the way that I find to do that is you have to love them, and so you have to love your partners. If you can't love your partner, then it's not going to work. And your partner, if you're married, is your spouse. And if you don't love each other, you're not going to work well together. So that's how you avoid that pitfall. Is just like when you're in your companionship on your mission, you know, you have to learn to work together, and you have to really love each other and respect each other. You're going to be different. You're going to have different talents, different personalities, but really to be successful, you have to have that love and respect for each other if you're going to have a good partnership with your business partners.
Thank you. In reading about you online a little bit, there was a great story about what happened when you thought about dropping out of college. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what brought you to that point and how you remotivated yourself.
My dad remotivated me, by the way. So probably not all of you have heard or read the story. I was in my third year at BYU and decided that I had enough at school. I don't know how many of you have felt sometimes a little discouraged and wanted to drop out, but I decided to drive home and drop out of school. And my mother said, does your dad know you're here? And I said, no. And she says, well, you should go tell him that you decided to drop out of school. And I said, well, I really don't want to do that right now. I want to go to sleep. I've been driving all night. So anyway, so I went to my room and tried to go to sleep. And my mother said, your dad's on the phone. And I said, well, how does he know I'm here? She says, because I told him. So he told me in about 4 different languages to get my rear out to the ranch. And so I went out there, and he immediately started asking me for various parts of my clothes, and he asked me for my keys to my car. He asked me for my wallet. He asked me for my pants and my shirt and my socks. And pretty soon I was down to my underwear, and he said, well, go in the bathroom and take your underwear off. And I said, are you kidding? And he says, no. And I said, wow. So I said, okay, I'll play a silly game. So I went in the bathroom, took my clothes off, and I had these towels wrapped around me, and people coming in out of the bathroom was kind of smiling at them. And they wanted to know why I was standing there naked. And I just said, well, I'm just doing this little game with my father. And they got a big chuckle out of that, and went and asked my dad what was going on. He said, mind your own business, go back to work. And so 5 o'clock, my dad came and said, I'm shutting up the office. Make up your mind. You going back to school, or what are you going to do? And I said, well, give me my clothes back. And I says, My dad said, no, I'll give you clothes back if you go back to school, but if you're not going back to school, you better catch a ride with one of your friends. I said, I don't have any clothes. He says, well, you're going to go, if you don't want to go back to school and do what I asked you to do, you're going to go out of the world like you came into it, naked. So I said, well, you're not leaving me much of a choice. He says, you're not old enough to make your own choices. So what would you do? I got in my car and went back to school. My motivation was like clothes better than I did being naked. So, does that answer your question?
What brought you to the point of wanting to drop out?
Well, it was hard. I was in engineering, and it was difficult, and I just thought I'd like to go work for a while. I'd like to drop out and earn some money, and I was living from hand to mouth and having to work part-time for my education, and because I wasn't on a scholarship, I had to work, and so it was hard. I mean, it's hard to study and work, and I was discouraged. I wasn't doing very well in school, and my grades were suffering a little bit. I was telling Brad I was in gymnastics, and I was spending more time in the gym than I was in school, and so my problem was that I needed to go back to my classes and not spend so much time in school. I love playing a thing called racquetball, and I love my buddies down at the gym and at the field house, and so anyway, I was like some of you, maybe a little bit immature, and didn't have my head screwed on straight. And my dad did, though, thank goodness, and I went back to school. So I don't know how to answer any different than that. I was being ridiculous. I was being stupid. Hate to say that, but that's what I was.
So Ray, I have a kind of a two-part question. One specifically about the semiconductor industry. And I'm sure you've heard that a lot of the industry leaders have announced new technologies that have broken Moore's law. And I was just curious, like what your opinion is of growth in that industry and what it'll look like going forward, and also just where growth in general will be in the future as well.
Okay, that's a pretty technical question for this audience. Moore's law is that the feature size will decrease double every 2 years. In other words, the technology will double every 2 years in feature size, reducing, I should say. And so they haven't really broken Moore's law. Moore's law may be broken in the sense of the word that the concept. Moore, by the way, is spelled M-O-O-R-E. That stands for Gordon Moore. Yeah, he was one of the founders of Intel. I call Moore's law M-O-R-E-S. In other words, and this is, which I think mine's more accurate than his, which you get more for less. Because if you look at the technology we're offering, when I started in semiconductors, we were selling a single transistor for $2,000. The military represented 80% of the revenue of the industry. Today, it's less than 10%. And so, now we've got 33 million transistors per millimeter of silicon, and compared to one transistor, which represented like 1,000 times that, and yet we're getting less money for them now. A microprocessor like the i7 probably is $200 or $300, has hundreds of millions of transistors on it, and so you're getting more for less. That's what I call Moore's law, and I've been saying that everywhere I go, that it's really not M-O-O-R-E, it's M-O-R-E. You just get more for less. So, so where's the industry headed? Technically we're hitting the wall. At some point, you can't go to 0 nanometers, and I think the smallest geometry we have now is 10 nanometers, which is far more technical than you care to understand. I think the concept of, or where the industry is going is more systemization, providing the customer a complete system solution as opposed to providing them just a integrated circuit as you would. So I think that's where the technology is going to be advanced, is the more complete the system is, that you're going to see, like these IoTs, these what they call Internet of Things. You're going to see more of that sort of thing, more system-type solutions going forward. Because Silicon Valley is more Software Valley than it is Silicon Valley. Does that answer that, hopefully, a little bit?
So my question is, I'm pursuing a career in HR, and I was wondering what type of advice does a former CEO have for a future director of HR?
Okay, so again, remember I said you don't have to be a CEO to be an entrepreneur. So thinking outside the box as an HR person, that's human resources, is to bringing in the unique kind of benefits for your company at a lower cost. So if you look at an employee's salary, about 30% of it are fringes, which is what human resources handles. And so that's a third of that person's income is really attributed to the cost associated with these fringe benefits. So if you're going to be a director of human resources, you really have to understand and focus on how can I keep these benefits growing and yet keep the cost down to a third or less. And that would be the advice I would give you, is really thinking outside the box, coming up with ways to lower the cost of the benefits of your employees, because they still want more. They're asking for more benefits, but the company can't keep plowing that much of its operating costs into fringe benefits. Is that close to what you were looking for? Okay.
What was the biggest mistake you made as you started out in business, and what did you learn from it?
Well, remember I talked about a mistake is really not important as long as you correct it. And so my big goal was to always correct my mistakes and not let them become a problem. So the biggest mistake you make is not correcting the mistake in the first place. So if I summarize into the ones that I'm most disappointed in, was probably not being more careful about my board selection. In other words, getting the board of directors that saw my vision and bought into the vision that I had, for the company. Boards, change about every 5 years. You rotate your board, and you're constantly getting new people and trying to love them like you would your partner, even though they're like your partner. Is hard to do because they're not there full time. They're really not involved that much into the business. So picking a good board of directors, I think, is a key thing that I should have done a little better job at least in the last 10 years of my business.
So I'm graduating this April, and
where are you?
Right
here.
here. Sorry. So I'm graduating this April, and I don't have money, but I want to be an entrepreneur, and I want to start my business with my friend, but we don't have money. So I thought it's a better idea to start working, to get a job, to start working. Even my parents told me that I need to find a job and work. But if it's you, what would you do in this kind of situation? You want to do a business, you want to be an entrepreneur, but you don't have money. What's the best way to do? Should I just start working, or then later start a business, or?
Well, I'm reminded of the story about Socrates. A student was kept bugging him about wanting to learn more, and Socrates was getting a little irritated, wanting to know how he became so wise. And so Socrates said, "Tell you what, meet me down at the ocean at 6 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, and I'll show you how to get more knowledge." And so the student was actually there early. He was actually there at 5:30. And so Socrates said, "Oh, he's impressed." So he took him out till the water's about waist deep. And then he pushed the student's head underwater and held it there until the student started gurgling and taking in water. And before he drowned, the professor, or Socrates, lifted him out of the water and said, "What did you want more than anything else while your head was underwater?" And the student said, I wanted air. Well, when you want knowledge as bad as you want air, you'll find a way to get it. So if you want money, you got to find a way to get the money. That's the challenge, is raising money to start your company. And there's no single way of doing that. So you're going to have to figure that out, how you're going to raise the money. If you're going to take it from other people, then they're going to own your company. If you want to own your company, you got to come up with the money yourself. I really can't tell you how to get the money. Don't rob, don't steal, but you know, find a way to get the money. That's the key. And your parents telling you to go get a job, I guess they're tired of funding you. So.
Dr. Norm Wright here has lots of money. You can talk to him.
Okay.
That's what he
Dr.
gets
Wright.
paid the big bucks here.
Well,
so.
you have a club here, don't you? That Entrepreneurs Club.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And there are people who, like myself, who do look at businesses and decide if we want to help fund them. I'm just closing on a round this week on a small business, software business. So you know, we do look at businesses and decide if we want to fund them. So that's another way. The unfortunate thing is, though, if whoever gives you the money holds the gun. So
That's right.
if you want to hold
Ray showed the slide of VC, so you got to be careful when you go
That's
down
right.
that path, don't you? Let's give Ray a round of applause for being here today.